Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stu and the Nun. And want to welcome everybody here, episode 376. And back, you may see this, recognize this fine looking gentleman right here, young Mr. Bob Carlstrom, on the show with us again tonight. He was on about 4 months ago. Bob, welcome back to Stu and the Nun.
Well, thank you. It's really good to be back with you, and I really look forward to our discussion tonight.
Yeah, and and one of these days we're gonna get you to meet Nunn. We're gonna get him on here that we can see. There is another half, but
there you go.
Yeah, good to have you on. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, 376. We are the last episode of August. I cannot believe August is essentially the summer's over. I think, what is it, Bob? Labor Day kind of marks the official end of summer as kids go.
Pretty much, yeah. Monday.
Yeah, I just. I don't know where it went. That is for sure. I don't feel like I got a minute of it to enjoy this year.
Well, as we get older, the time really flies, and they're not kidding.
That it does. I think we just get too busy. That's the
problem.
There you
go. There's that.
We don't kick back and chill. We're just always got something going on between whatever work, kids, grandkids, and just volunteering and life in general. And we don't just relax, but I think we're just creatures of our bad habits there. But yeah, welcome back. If you kind of give the viewers a little bit of a little bit of your background and kind of and what you do with the Prosperity for U.S. Foundation, that'd be great.
Okay, I'm glad to. I started with as executive director of the Prosperity for Us Foundation, and it's a 501c3. And our mission is really to create an opportunity and enable citizens to really engage, in government, particularly at the state and local level. And what we're proposing are a number of amendments that are intended, that would be state constitutional amendments that are intended to give people an actual voice in their government, and particularly at the state and local level. And those key amendments would deal with these things. And again, I emphasize they're constitutional amendments, not legislative amendments that are subject to changing majorities in state legislatures, and also changing majorities that may exist in local governments, such as county councils, city councils, and that kind of thing. Because we found clearly that it's not only the federal government that seems to be dysfunctional, but we've also found that in many states, people are suffering as a result of actions taken by the states. Now, the specific items are, number one, capping property taxes, and that property taxes should not be raised while you own the home. It should be based on the initial purchase price and, the assessment applied throughout your duration there. And when you sell it, then the new appraisal would kick in, for the buyer, because homes are a part of people's retirement planning, an investment value to them. And that should not be continually eroded by increasing property taxes that are tied to increases in the property value. So people should have certainty in that. If property taxes are going to be raised above a certain level, above inflation and average family incomes, then the voters should approve it or disapprove it.
Right.
And so you should have a direct opportunity to do that. The second thing is is
Can
to really.
can we roll back? I want to hit on the property tax thing a little bit.
Okay, sure.
So it's interesting. You mentioned, you pay it, it's set when you buy the house, when the house sale transaction happens,
Right.
and not until you sell it again should ever be readjusted. There's definitely some validity in that, because a lot of them, at least from my own personal experience from a few houses I've owned, is the town comes by and does a drive-by, or they hire consultants or something, and they come by and say, yep, your house is now worth this. And they don't see, short of having permits pulled for something, they can't see what you're doing on the inside. They can't see what you've done in the back. And improvements you've made or haven't made, for them to just jack up a price based on a whole bunch of, speculation and things like that. That seems like a better than it is today. But is anywhere doing that? Is any locality doing that kind of stuff, or are they all raising it throughout the?
Well, in Florida, and David Biddulph, who's the founder and chairman of the Prosperity for Us Foundation, was really instrumental in getting the citizens to demand and support constitutional amendments in the Florida Constitution to create a property tax cap and to require a vote of the citizens as well in that. But one thing that's also important about the property taxes, it really becomes a matter of the tyranny of the unelected, because usually they send out a career assessor of some unknown credential. And then, and I appealed this in Maryland, for example, because I got an assessment that was much higher, tax assessment, much higher than any of my neighbors. So I went and appealed to the county, Montgomery County, Maryland, and it was a waste of time, because I went in there and the assessor's in there joking with the administrative law judges. So I said, okay, respectfully, I'm going to appeal to the state. So I went up to the state and met with the administrative law judge up there, and he said, Bob, you wasted your trip. Nothing I can do about it. So I was taxed as a result of some career person in the bureaucracy raising my taxes well above what my neighbors had. And that's wrong. That is absolutely wrong. And you should have protections against that. And that's why we want a constitutional amendment that governs what the state, and particularly the locality, can do. That if they intend to raise those tax rates above a certain level, it needs voter approval.
Yeah, I mean, they could, if the town or whoever's in authority is, someone wants to target you, I mean, they could just come, your stuff's going up. Your kid beat my kid on the football game. You cut me off. I mean, it could be anything, right? Personal or just,
It can. And seniors who are on fixed incomes, and particularly those at maybe the lower end of the income scale or middle income, are being taxed out of their homes. There's a fundamental value here, is you own your property when you buy it. The government doesn't own it. The government should not have a right to increase its lien. You need to pay for goods and services that the local governments provide one way or the other. But you should not be in a position where you have to lose your home because the property taxes have exceeded the mortgage. And that's happening all over the country. And that's got to stop.
And you mentioned Florida. I mean, I know Governor DeSantis has talked about, he's made a statement of like a homeowner should not be renting their land from the government, that
exactly
there should be no property tax. I mean, there isn't for certain, like 100% disabled vets down there and a couple things, but there shouldn't, like you said, you bought your home,
right?
And you pay taxes on that when you bought it, and you bought the property on your home and stuff. That's your property.
Yeah. And
Um,
you'll pay the same tax every year, but it's not going to go up till you sell
right.
it.
Or just not, or you pay it when you first buy it, like every other good
Yeah.
you just you pay your tax and that's it. I buy a, I buy something at the store, but then again, they kind of do it with vehicles, right? But you pay registration and stuff, but you don't pay the sales tax every
Right.
year. You just
Right.
pay time. So you pay the sales tax on buying a house one time, and that's it. And it's on the local government to figure out how to best spread that out.
Yeah.
But another one kind of goes into is property tax, is school and those kind of taxes. I guess what are the thoughts on that? Because I have neighbors of mine that don't have kids, and they're like, "Why am I paying school taxes? I don't have a kid in
Yeah.
the system."
Yeah. Some states are playing with that. The schools, public school systems, and local governments have been really thriving, on your property taxes. And the question is, some jurisdictions I've heard of, and I don't know where they are, have really also created a school tax or fee, that kind of thing. But that's something that's got to be resolved. I know state legislators are very concerned too about the impact of what we're proposing. But we've said to them that in fact you're really increasing the economic condition, of the homeowners and property owners in the area, and that and also school systems reportedly are sitting on a lot of cash.
Mm-hmm.
And so and there's not any real direct accountability on that, yet they're able to argue that we need to help the kids. They spend a lot of money on their administrative overhead, but not as much money as they should in the classrooms and with direct student assistance personnel. So
Well, we see that from the NEA and the National Union, who are more
it
concerned
is.
about dealing and fighting in politics than making sure the kids have everything they need to succeed.
Yeah.
And it's a valid concern. I mean, I have kids and I have grandkids, so yes, I've used the school system, and I've had friends of mine that have been, they put their kids in private school, and I'm like, or and I'd be like, you're still paying for that public school, and they get it, and then they're
Yep.
paying for private. That's their choice, right? They're
That's
not
right.
out of paying for the public school, but they make the choice to. But for people that don't have kids in the school, it seems like they would get, I don't know, a discount or something. But that I could be okay with, keep paying. But property tax, I'm all for Governor DeSantis's
Yep.
saying, no, you shouldn't be renting your property. You paid it, you're done.
Yep. Yep.
They can't-
You made a deal. You made a deal. It's a contract. And part of that contract is the price of the home, the interest that you're paying on it, if you're paying interest on it, and what the property tax is at the time you buy it. End of story.
right. If they want to spread that over a number of years, that's fine.
Whatever. Yeah.
But it's but I mean, if they can't do that, I like your option of pay for it. It doesn't get adjusted until you sell it.
Yep.
And,
That's the idea.
and look, if I sell for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 profit on my house that I held for whatever number of years, then and I sold it for, let's say I bought it for 200,000, I sold it for 500,000, then guess the tax is now based on 500,000 for the new homeowner.
Yep. Yep.
I mean,
And that's the market. So, let the market dictate, the outcome,
right.
not government bureaucrats.
Yeah. So that kind of goes into the next thing, which has been big, is the voter bill of rights.
Yep.
And I like to hear just what's that about, and kind of what is the goals of that the foundation is pushing.
Well, we think decisions have to be made by governments. State, local governments need to be accountable, to the voters and to the citizen voters. And what our amendments do, and the other one deals with regulatory takings, where a state or local government might interfere with your use or value of the property, real property, or even intellectual property. You should have recourse and a guaranteed right to have a jury trial to challenge that activity, and particularly when you suffer loss. And that's, a regulatory taking, and it can take the form of state law, or it can take the form of zoning in terms of use of your property, or an environmental nonsensical thing that prohibits you from building, your house when you have an intermittent wetlands, which is just drainage and things like that. That's all got to be cleaned up, and that's, again, it's part of your freedom. Your property is a fundamental right in our Constitution, and the governments do not have a right to trample on that, and to dictate to you, beyond a certain point, your use of the property. And when they come in later and impact the use or value of the property, that's wrong, and the property owner, whether it's business or whether it's individual, should have a right for a jury trial to deal with on a timely basis. The other part of our thing is the right of the people. If you're in a state, Colorado has what they call the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which says that if the legislature is essentially going to increase taxes or increase spending above a certain level, it's got to go to a vote of the people. It's got to be approved that way, because, again, there needs to be, legislators need to have direct and fiduciary accountability, to the taxpayers, because they're spending our money, your
Right.
money, my money, everybody else's money. And so they need to be held accountable to that. Certainly at the federal level, it's the same problem. But the Tabor model in Colorado is a superb model. And it's also important. And in fact, even in Switzerland, they have the Swiss debt brake, which has worked incredibly well for the country of Switzerland in terms of stimulating, better financial strength, among the citizens over there, because, again, the government's got to be accountable to the people and revenues. And so discipline is needed. Yeah.
What does that mean, debt break? How does that work?
Well, it's a function of revenues and spending, and they've got to be relatively in line, and there can be a limited excess in spending, but it's got to be dealt with over a 4-year period, I think, is how it goes. But it's another concept for that. The Colorado model is a very, very excellent one to have, and in fact, the ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council, really strongly supports what's happened there, and they've strongly endorsed our Prosperity for Us Foundation proposal to push, in the states, to have a constitutional amendment that is modeled somewhat after the Colorado Tabor and the Swiss debt brake. Again, the voters need to have a right to directly appeal. And so what we're doing to this, and the question is, well, how are you going to do it, Bob? We're building a 180 million voter file. We're up to 80 million now, and we're going to be reaching out to American citizens nationwide, but on a state-based basis, to say, here's how to get involved. Here's a petition. Citizens have a right to petition their government. It's a First Amendment right. And many states, a number of states, enable citizens to have citizens' petitions to place something on the ballot, on the general election ballot. Which is what happened with Tabor when that was passed. And so citizens have a right to say, we want this structure in our Constitution. We want to avoid, unnecessary spending. We don't want to see property taxes being raised significantly. We want a constitutional right to challenge a regulatory taking, no matter how it affects something. If they're attacking your pricing structure or whatever, they have to stay out of that. Government has to stay out of that. In fact, we've got one more thing where, your congressional delegation in your state is the congressional delegation from your state. And therefore, they have a direct and fiduciary responsibility to you to not be a big spender in Congress. Right. And so our Fourth Amendment says, if you're a big spender in Congress, you may just go and you approve spending that's well in excess of inflation. You should not be eligible to run in the next primary. And that's a state right to determine how its primary is structured. So that's one way of making these guys in Washington, who are the big spenders, to start paying attention, because, again, they view it as sort of other people's money, and again, the power of taxing is you have to pay your taxes or you're in deep trouble. So these are our four amendments, but they're all designed to strengthen the will of the people and the ability of the people to really act and participate, in a very significant way where they can't do it right now. Because remember, states are the core unit of our country. We are the United States. We are a democratic republic. We are not a straight democracy. And this is an important thing to strengthen people's voice in their states so they can have a more direct impact, on what the elected people do at the state level or at the local government level.
Yeah, and no other states have adopted the Colorado model.
Not yet. That's why we're here. We are a unique organization to do this. Many states may try things individually on a siloed basis, but we're going nationwide, and we're building the infrastructure, the communications infrastructure to do this, and to speak directly to the American people. Say, here's your opportunity. Our purpose is to enable every citizen to have a voice and to make that voice known, in terms of amending and fixing their state constitution to enhance the Constitution's ability to protect them, against runaway spending, property tax increases, regulatory takings. That's what we're doing.
Right. And was that put in law in Colorado underneath because they're typically pretty left. I mean, was that under
it's in the Constitution of the state.
Oh, how long has it been there?
Oh, heavens.
That long. It's not something new.
Yeah, no, it's been there quite a while. And people have wondered, well, how can we get that done in other states? And so, that's the void, in terms of public affairs action and helping people engage. Too many people say too oftentimes, and you've probably, in a bar or a restaurant, they said, God, they're complaining about this or that. What can I do about it? Well, and so our purpose is to help people deal with these things that are a constant thorn in their side. Property tax is still an issue in Colorado, however. And one of our colleagues out there has seen his property taxes double, within the last 3 years. That's baloney, and that's got to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Rob said, it was passed by voters in 1992. So
is that what it was? Yeah. It's been around a while. Yeah.
That's why we got him as a producer, man. He can Google that stuff fast.
Good.
That is, it's something that, some of the other, when you think about states with mottos like live free or die or things like that, you would think they would pick that model up, but it probably impacts their ability to collect revenue.
Well, and one of the big challenges too is getting American people and right-thinking American people to engage, and to pay attention. If you depend on, the legacy media, you're not going to get the story, and to read and engage, because this is all about their freedoms. And our founder David Biddulph started the Prosperity for Us Foundation to out of concern for his grandchildren and the successors. And we need to leave, while we're active in that, is leave it better than we found it, and to fix things that need fixing. And these are things that haven't been addressed, in a comprehensive way for the American people, on a state-by-state basis. And that's what we're all about. And we're doing this for our grandchildren and successor generations. And we have to take the long view. And so I think everyone watching or listening to this, really needs to rethink, how can we get engaged? Because that's so important, I'm so pleased with what's happened, with the new administration this last 6 months. It's for 7 months, 8 months now. It's terrific, and but we've got to keep the momentum going, and we need to address, how the states are acting and behaving, particularly the blue states in this regard. People are suffering. The blue states are hemorrhaging in population. And, and the only thing that's ever saved California is the Jarvis Amendment and property tax limitation out there. Otherwise, they're screwing up the whole state. And that's why
Yeah.
1.7 million people left last year.
Yeah, they're raising every other tax. To rent a U-Haul to go out of California is very expensive, but it is very cheap to rent one to go into California.
Yeah, that's true.
But no, it's mentioned. You mentioned, leave it better than we found it. It kind of made me chuckle. I mean, that's the tenet of, that's a main tenet of scouting, and conservationists and environmentalists and that kind of stuff. I mean, something I've been very much involved with. I'm a big hunter, and even that, hunters are some of your biggest conservationists there are. And it's always been a rule of, when you go into another person's land or go into a state, public land or whatever, leaving it better than you found it. And in scouting, right, they have the concept of leave no trace, right? No trace. And it's so sad that as a society, we don't have that.
No.
For generationally, right? Generations of leaders and business and government leadership, we've not leaving our country, this planet, your community. No one's leaving it better than they found it, right? It just continues through taxation, corruption, reach, you name it. It's definitely not. That's why the whole concept of "are you better off than you were 4 years ago" kind of thing, right, during presidential elections.
It's so critical because fundamentally, your politics. You need to vote your budget. You need to vote the budget. Politics is not religion.
Right.
It's about your goal of realizing and maintaining your financial solvency, and for younger people the ability to realize the American dream for themselves.
Yeah, that's a good hashtag. That's a good. Politics is not something we need to get trending. But maybe at the end of President Trump's second term, it may be one of the first times we can say he's leaving it better than he found it. But
that's for sure.
the bar was pretty low, so I think he'll be able to see
real
that.
Low. Yeah.
Pretty.
I just continue to shake my head as I learn more and more what those guys did. Yeah.
Yeah, they keep turning over the rocks and just more and more. But So speaking of turning things over, let's talk about the whistleblower accountability.
Sure.
And kind of what that mantra and what that new mission is that you guys are going on.
Well, July 30 was the, I think, National Whistleblower Act, and we put out an op-ed on that. And, and we called for in that article a number of things. One was, independent oversight of whistleblower claims to prevent abuse, accountability for whistleblowers who breach court seals and or do it falsely, reform of the False Claims Act, and transparently in whistleblower prosecutor relationships. And let me talk about that. Whistleblowers are very, very courageous. The good ones are a very, very courageous group because they're going against the grain. And the purpose of whistleblowers, and when you think of fraud and abuse in the government and that kind of thing, there's so much of that. There's so much waste. And people in government, whether it's federal, state, or local, need to stand up and say, this is wrong. This is a waste. Don't bow to the pressures of those above you for spending, for example, wasteful spending on these things, looking for ways to spend money at the end of the year, or giving contracts, to friends, neighbors, and that for favor or payment for political favor. Whistleblowers are an important element of our society. It's a First Amendment freedom, again, to speak out and say, this is wrong, and there shouldn't be reprisals against them. Now, I know in the federal government, they have the Whistleblower Protection Act, and it was amended, I think, back in 2012, but that only applies to federal employees. different states have different statutes on that too. But I think it's really incumbent on all the states, to really protect sincere whistleblowers. It's interesting to note in Congress they don't have the Federal Whistleblower Protection Act doesn't apply to them, and but like so many other things, don't apply to Congress.
True.
The other part of that too is that there are those people who really exploit the whistleblower relationship. And we talked about that, and particularly, it's almost like the ambulance chasers, lawyers. This seems to be another fruitful area for that kind of plaintiff's bar, to even fabricate perhaps stories about maybe a particular company or something like that. And so what happens is they're essentially extorting a settlement.
People make stuff up and just say a whistleblower.
And it's cheaper. And it's cheaper to pay off. And it may not even be a whistleblower. It may be a customer. It may be an employee. But it's cheaper to pay off, the whistleblower if it's a faulty claim than it is to litigate it.
Right.
And you get so angry when you have been sued a few times in the past by some miscreants and whoop them. But the cost of the attorney's fees, far exceeded what the ultimate settlement was, because you win the trial, then they say I'm going to appeal, and boom, it's a contingency plaintiff kind of thing. And so there's that racket that's got to occur there too. And particularly under the False Claims Act, where people are suing the government, or being sued by the government, they need to be prosecuted, if they've submitted false claims against the government. When you look at the fraud, for example, that Elon Musk found, throughout the government, and you look particularly at Medicaid fraud, you look at Social Security fraud. One Social Security recipient is 130 years old, 150 years old, and that kind of thing. There's all of that, and that's false claims. And so that needs to be pursued, with a lot of vigor, and those people need to be prosecuted. So consequently, it's an area that is ripe for a lot of correction and a lot of clear view and transparency. So, and that's why the government should be transparent. So when you go back to the kinds of proposals that we have, such as the TABOR, the fiscal responsibility kind of amendment, which should also pass, I would hope, at some point in time, by the states, in terms of the federal level. You really need that transparency so people can see, the sunshine, let the sunshine in,
Right.
and expose things. And that's what's got to happen. And so I'm glad there's more and more information available, but then because that information's out there, it's got to be deployed, and people have to be held accountable, if in fact they've done some shady things, either as the object of a legitimate whistleblower, and if they're federal or government workers who've been wasting money and that kind of thing, they should be canned. If they're fraudulent whistleblowers, they need to be prosecuted for raising false claims.
What I don't get, if someone if someone makes money off it, so they make a whistleblower, they make a claim, and it's fraudulent,
Right.
and they get paid off, and it's
Right.
found fraudulent. Are you saying there's no ramifications to them if it's
Well, if it's settled, if it becomes settled, it's I think the legal term, like race judicata, it was a court approved settlement and that kind of thing, so it's gone.
But it's based on a lie.
Based on a lie. Yeah, based on a lie. And that's where you get into prosecutorial and judicial integrity too, which can be another kettle of fish. But yeah, if there's a settlement that's occurred, it's been approved. If it's been approved by a court, that's one thing. If it's just a private settlement and then it turns out later that it was fraudulent, then you're just subject to the statute of limitations, depending on whether it's 3 years or 5 years, and you can go back and call a U.S. attorney or a state's attorney and say, this really needs to be prosecuted as fraud.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than someone making a false claim to police about,
Yep.
an attack or an assault, and they find out it was made up. A lot of times the police will charge that person, right? They file.
Absolutely.
If someone makes a claim, and obviously someone can sue someone for slander, but those lawyers also cost money.
Yeah.
But I just can't believe that. I mean, to me, it's not much different. Stolen valor, right? Someone says that they have, they were a veteran and they've got all these medals and awards, and they get money for, stolen valor isn't a crime until they receive money for it, and then let's say, money from the VA or for a private foundation, or someone builds them a house, and it's found out that they lied about their service, then they can be prosecuted because they gained financially from those lies.
Yeah.
So if someone makes a claim against a company or an organization or government, whatever it may be, and gets paid off in a court settlement, and then it's found out that it was all made up, that should very much be prosecutable. I mean, gained.
Yeah, I think so. And particularly, if a false claim damages the market reputation of a company and therefore adversely impacts its sale and ability to do business, that's a serious deal. And sometimes when you're in the, let's say in the C-suite in a company, you really sit there and do a risk analysis.
Right.
If I settle this and they retract it, then I'm not so damaged but if I litigate it and more of this baloney comes out, what are the costs to me? And a lot of times that happens. Sometimes, I'd rather pay the $50,000 than spend $300,000 fighting it.
Right. And they may win in the legal court, but lose in the court of public opinion. Right.
Exactly.
Because whoever controls the narrative or, gets the attention, you could be totally innocent. It's no different than, someone that gets accused of something terrible, like a sexual assault or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
We see it all the time. Let's take it way back to the Duke lacrosse players, right? The young lady made an accusation. They were just ran through the ringer. It was years later that, she made it up, but that damage is done in a lot of people's perceptions.
It was because they're forever having to defend something that was false. And, and that lingered on. And certainly probably in that woman's case, the statute of limitations had passed. So there was nothing further she could do. And of course, the prosecutor was not that good of a guy either.
Yeah, I mean, but it's just it's amazing that you can't be, because it is extortion or blackmail. Yeah. Hey, I'm saying this. Oh, you're going to pay me off $500,000 and I'm just going to go away quietly. That is the textbook definition of blackmail.
Well, and they do it to people in the entertainment business all the time.
Yep. Yeah. And
whether it's sports or otherwise. Yeah.
Right. Because people are more concerned with protecting their reputation.
Yeah.
And their reputation has a dollar value to it because they have endorsements or they have influence and this and that kind of stuff. And they would just pay it off and make it go away, sign an NDA.
Well, yeah. Yeah, in a sense, it becomes legally sanctioned theft when that's allowed to happen, and that's wrong.
Which taints the term whistleblower. It doesn't give the whistleblower whistleblower protection. It makes the whistleblower could be a very bad person, not just a good person who's trying to do something right or highlight something being done wrong.
Well, Stu, that's an excellent point. How do you tell the good guys from the bad guys sometimes?
Right, and. When you put something forward about whistleblower protection and accountability, is there anything, are you guys looking at that? Is there any way to say only if it's a good whistleblower? I mean, I don't know how you would even frame that.
Yeah, we really haven't dug into that. I think in our column we just really wanted to call attention to it because our focus is really on those state constitutional amendments. But I do hope somebody can take it up, and maybe we will, as we move along a little bit more.
Right. Are there any stats about has anyone had the ability to look at the number of whistleblower claims and determine what percentage of them were fraudulent or false?
You
And
know,
you can,
that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I bet one could find it. You know, either go on IA or artificial intelligence rather, or look in the Justice Department too in terms of False Claims Act. That
I mean,
might be found there. I haven't really looked at the numbers.
it could be tough, especially if ones were settled and yet it's kind of secure and
They're going, yeah,
you don't know whether those are a good one or a bad, or they just paid off. So it could big error percentage of error of
yeah,
like, this could be plus or minus 15 points, right? On because of
yeah,
the number were settled that we don't know if they was it a really valid one because they paid them off.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. And when and when I've been an employer in some of my prior business incarnations, sometimes you get these ridiculous EEO suits and those kinds of things brought by a disgruntled employee who doesn't get the raise that he or she wanted or is about to be terminated for non-performance, and so then they they hire a lawyer and sue you for an equal employment opportunity violation in some cases, and so you say, okay, that's baloney. We're not going to do it. But if they persist and it starts to get more costly, then you say, all right, then let's settle and go away.
right, because it's a lightning rod.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
worth. Yeah,
yeah. And it's a shame. You know, it's so sad to see, you know, the pervasive, the lack of integrity, you know,
yeah,
that people have when it comes to a dollar bill.
yeah. It's like you say, it's the concept of a whistleblower, no matter where it's at, is an an honorable thing to do for someone to step out and
Yeah,
put things at risk. But to have to have people violate that and just like say it's people just need to see it one or two times, and be like, that's just
yeah,
easy money, or it just loses its value, I guess.
yeah.
But um,
It does. You know, remember this recently, the two Internal Revenue Service people
mm,
who blew the whistle on the IRS.
right,
And that took great courage, you
yeah,
know, and great courage.
under the old administration,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, and they spoke in Congress and that, and they really stood out and stuck to their guns. You know, they were impugned by people in IRS at that time, and all of it. They were impugned, you know, in the congressional hearings, but they stood tall, you know, and that's one outfit in the government that needs a lot of house cleaning as well.
yeah. Rob is saying that the term false whistleblower is not even a legal category.
Yeah.
And yeah, about there's roughly 600, 800 new cases filed annually.
Wow.
Under
Wow.
the yeah, so saying federal whistleblowers file thousands of lawsuits under the False Claims Act each year, with 600 to 800 cases filed annually. So yeah, it's that's something. And it's, I guess you gotta sift through the noise and just try to figure out which one is because you see this, you see the things like Aaron Brockovich, right? That story against the
Right.
energy company in Oklahoma. Very brave thing. This young lady, just doing what's right. People are getting poisoned and sickened, and they do that, and they go, "Ah, awesome! What cojones? What risk and
Yeah.
integrity had to step out." But then you see these other ones that, like say, they just get a pay. It's so what I'm thinking is lawyers are the root of all evil.
I know it. I've I've always said they. I want to be able to always hire them and fire them.
Yeah,
You know, but
they
not all lawyers would agree with that. So
yeah, they may be the
yeah.
reason for the term necessary evil.
No, well, they're very important for good
They
guys. There's so many good ones, but
yeah.
yeah.
So, what other big initiatives is the foundation taking? I mean, you've covered some monster ones. Any other major ones you guys are looking at?
Well, those are the big four. You know, we essentially formed in January of this year in 2025.
Okay,
Yeah, and so we're well into it, and particularly in building this infrastructure that I mentioned before of 180 million voter files, so we can reach out to American citizens and putting all of that in place. And I really commend the courage and foresight of David Biddulph, who's the founder and chairman of this, and his desire to really provide a better country, a safer country, better rights, and better opportunity for our grandchildren and great grandchildren. And so that's where we're focused. We have also supported the need for an Article 5, a state's fiscal responsibility amendment as part of Article 5, because there the states have the opportunity not only to demand a convention of the states for the purpose of offering amendments and amending the Constitution. And that needs to happen because there are so many things, that I think are warranted, particularly to create a financial collar, a fiscal collar around congressional spending, and so we've supported the fiscal responsibility amendment that is responsible. There are others out there that have supported, let's keep the Supreme Court, at 9 members. Don't let the other team court pack. There's another one out there, one organization is also pushing for congressional term limits, as a matter of the Constitution. I do think, however, that really should be the prerogative of the states. And I'll tell you why. There was a 1998 case, I think it was called Term Limits Incorporated versus I forget, Thornton, I think. And the Arkansas Constitution had a term limit there for 2 terms in the Senate and 3 terms in the House. And remember, your members of Congress are your delegation to the Congress. They're not out there independent of the state. And that's why we had that the big spenders concept we're offering. But the Supreme Court, which was a liberal Supreme Court at that time, on a 5-4 decision said states don't have the right to determine the term limits of the members of their congressional delegation. It's entirely a federal responsibility. But what's great about the good side of that case is it was a 5-4 decision, and the dissent wrote about an 82-page dissenting opinion whose primary author was Clarence Thomas, and also joined in by the Chief Justice, and joined in by Antonin Scalia, and the lady from Arizona, O'Connor, and so we now have a different court.
Right.
And what the first sentence in their dissent said, the states have an absolute right to determine the term limits of its delegation to Congress. So that's something that I hope will burble up, because that role needs to be returned to the states. It should not be seized, by the federal government. And so that liberal majority, in my humble opinion, is dead wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's term limits are definitely. I never knew that they had, it could be done by the state level.
Well, it should be.
But I mean that they even have the ability to do that.
Well, they've had it, but the federal government has eroded a lot of the state's primary authority.
Yes.
For example, the Department of Education. I mean, education's a state responsibility.
Yeah, that was
so many. Yeah.
Harder form, the Department of Education. It wasn't even.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So the federal government has reached out. And part of the liberal strategy on that is to really reduce the states to administrative entities and really establish a dominant federal control. And we saw that in the last Congress and Congress before that, where the other team, and the Democrats, wanted to essentially take over the conduct of elections in the states by 2 different bills. I think that they tried to do one, as a general proposition, and one that was sort of, playing the race card. And both were rejected, fortunately, because their objective was and they said that, well, we're only doing this because, that we're dealing with the federal representatives, not the state ones. And so states can have a different ballot or a different kind of election, which is nonsense, because they want, with all the requirements they had in their bill, they just simply wanted to squash the states, and the states would just conform, and so there's that, and so when you have people who want to have one party dominance, in the House and the Senate, and flood the judiciary or court pack the Supreme Court, and also control the White House, and also manipulate elections, that's a real threat. And that's why the American people, in terms of what we're doing at state level, should do it. The work that we're doing also in terms of, Tabor 2.0 in all the different states, that's something that sends a strong message to Congress. Say, we're doing this in the states. You guys got to wake up and become accountable to this too, because you are a part of a individual state's delegation to the Congress, and you need to be cognizant of it and respond, to your taxpayers in your state. So,
right. Yeah. Let me ask you, as we wrap up here, have you guys, as a foundation, you guys got a lot of influence and power player. Do you have any feedback into the administration, or do you guys have influence? Are you consulted? Any kind of officially or unofficially?
I've been swimming in this pond for a lot of years, and a lot of good friends, because I'm a part of the conservative movement, have moved in, to work, in different parts of the administration. And so, and those are trusted, personal, professional relationships. And so, everybody has a swimming pool that they swim in, and, I'm in the Washington area one, and so I swim there. So you get to know people over time. Same thing's true in any community, you have that. And so it's, everybody has a different circle of relationships, and many of my professional ones, even though I've been in other parts of business and industry, but have, are still in town and love what they're doing, are very dedicated, to saving our country and saving our republic.
Well, that's why I asked. I mean, I'm not even in the DC area, but I've had a lot of close friends and associates in the first and definitely in this administration. And, I've considered myself fortunate and honored to have that. And I just figured in that area down in the belt, if you guys have had the ability talking to, whether some part of, Treasury or, DOJ or something like that, if you guys have had the ability, like I say, it may be off the record, but just to drop some in their ear, because the administration seems very, we're the last one, and many past ones were very much, we know better than anyone else. It's our way or no way. And this administration seems very open.
It is.
Outside.
They're very open. They're very accessible. And you have a president who's always on television taking questions from reporters almost daily, which is really, really significant. We do, and I do weigh in, on some of the federal things. For example, I signed on a coalition letter strongly opposing a Senate bill that wanted to impose taxes on patents, on patents. I said, that's just nonsense. And that may have come out of this administration's Commerce Department. And so I will represent us too on some of these bills, that occur there. And, I continue to engage in Washington with other conservative leaders as well on a weekly basis.
Well, awesome. Well, hopefully some of this you guys can get up, or they're paying attention, and
I hope. Yeah, you wear out a lot of shoe leather in this town.
Yes, yeah, or for sure, or pay a lot for parking, or
yeah, I know.
But hey, at least it's cleaner and safer now. I guess that's what they're saying.
Boy, I'll tell you, what a difference! A difference! My grandson, who has lived in the Georgetown part of, he's now off to college. in South Carolina and Clemson. But we're asking him, what's it been like for you? Because he grew up in the district in the Georgetown area. He says, well, I haven't felt safe for about 2 or 3 years. And this is a city kid. And he said, now it's very different. Everybody's feeling it. And so many people are appreciative of it. And the president has a lot to brag about. He's a man of action. He's extremely smart. And I'm so impressed when I listen to him take the hard questions and how he answers them, both on the short-term basis, and there's a very substantial long-term strategy behind it. So I'm very proud, of the American people electing him.
That's what we hear outside of the Beltway. I mean, and it's interesting. People, they do some man on the street interviews, but you hear someone personally, you can notice a difference. I mean, I spend a lot of time in DC, but honestly, in DC proper, I'm not usually down there at night, right? I'm in Northern Virginia or somewhere, but I've been down there at night when it's really cold, like the inauguration, and really, because you don't have to worry about other people out looking for mischief. It's just too damn cold and wet. But not in the summertime. I mean, I've been down in some of the around the monuments by myself, but that was a number of years ago. That was probably 10 plus years ago. I would feel comfortable going down by the wall or walking around the Korean Memorial at night because a lot of people. But from what I've heard, it's just even that it's gotten so bad, much less you get anywhere off Constitution, then it gets really sketchy.
Well, it does. But I'm hearing it's a lot better now, with the National Guardsmen roaming around with the police, and even the DC mayor did a complete about face in terms of recognizing the difference.
I mean, you can't dispute facts. I mean, you can spin whatever you want on talk shows, but I mean, when you're responsible for it, and this, you talk about, 80 something % drop in carjackings and this and that, it's you can't spin that and just pad the numbers. I mean, but you mentioned the president I mean, what a breath. I mean, we all knew it was coming after his first administration, but I mean, 7 cabinet meetings in 7 months, and it's like that comes on, those news outlets clear their schedule because it's going to run for, and it is amazing. I mean, he's the foreign leader, and it's not just a quick hi bye, shake hands, we're done. You better
his pedigree is I mean, he's a CEO, business CEO, and builder, developer. He's done it internationally as well as domestically, and he, in a very tough area of real estate, and so he understands the economy. Sadly, to many people who've been in government, they've never been in the economy. They've only been overhead on the economy, and that's where a lot of times huge mistakes are made, because at best they might only have an academic understanding, if any understanding at all. That's what the president speaks about when he talks about stupid decisions that were made, is people didn't have a clue as to what were the ramifications. And a free market economy is a linchpin of our successful republic, and it's the linchpin going forward.
I mean, that's when you see people like, someone like Biden that spends 47 years in government. They've never been in the world. We do the same thing in academia. People that graduate masters and start teaching and being a professor and never work in the real world, they're in a la-la land. They have no idea what business is like and what it's, which, to me, his I've always said it's so crazy how a billionaire, someone born into money as he was, that most of the American people and the blue collar people can relate to him. How could they relate to someone that's had it so well and been so rich? Because he, regardless if he's at the guy building towers and buildings or whatever, he's out there negotiating. He's dealing with all the real world negatives and positives of trying to do business. And whether it's that or it's the guy that's bagging groceries or driving a truck, they're all doing it, but at different levels, dealing with conflict and personalities and positives and negatives. And it took me a while to realize that's why the American people can relate to him so much, because he just lives life like it's a business. That's why he fires people as fast as he does. He doesn't just send them off to another, right? He gets criticized a a lot in the first administration because he hired a lot of generals, and he got criticized because he had so many military generals. But I think he felt, well, they've already been through it. They got some background. They'd have some pedigree and be honest. But even that, they wouldn't toe the line. He'd fire him and fire someone else. I mean, no.
Yeah. Your best friends in life are those that are always brutally and directly honest with you.
Right.
Otherwise, he's a very gregarious and a good guy to meet, and to chat with briefly. And he's very much a regular guy, but he also doesn't stand for BS at all.
Yep. Yeah. And he sells some zingers sometimes. That's for sure. He can.
It does.
Many people. I had the luxury of a number of years ago when a previous show I used to host. I had Donald Rumsfeld on for about 35 minutes, and it was my show we ever did because I'm like, no, Fox doesn't even get him for 35 minutes, and he was cracking jokes and everything. And you never saw that side of him, and he didn't have to put on the image behind the DoD lectern and all that stuff. And he was just, he was such a serious, I mean, I talk about a lifelong, contributor to our government and society of all the administrations. But he's just a person, and he can lie. And it made the interview that much better because you're like, he's just a normal guy. He can make quips and sarcastic jokes and all that kind of stuff. And it's this day one of my favorite interviews.
Well, he was. And I think years ago he had been CEO of GD Searle, which I think was a pharmaceutical company in Illinois at one time. And so he had a broad experience, and he was a terrific and terrific individual as well. Really was. Yeah.
Well, hey, Bob, thank you so much. We covered
thank you
tonight, and that hour flew by. And
well, you're kind. Yeah.
And, wow, I learned even more. I mean, just I'm interested to see how this the taxpayer bill of rights progresses and hopefully makes a movement on the four basic tenets there, and then on the whistleblower accountability. I mean, there's give me a lot to think about. But
well, it's a mission, and it's one that I'm dearly grateful, to have. And to work with a guy like David Biddulph, Dan Renee, and others that are really committed to this because it's so critical, again, for our children and our grandchildren, that these reforms in state constitutions are made.
Yep. Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much. Thank you for coming back on and giving us some of your Thursday evening and even starting a little bit late. But
it's okay.
Great having you on, sir.
It's an honor to be with you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Everyone have a good night, and stay tuned to our socials, and have a good, safe holiday, long Labor Day weekend.